I'm glad you are. You put together innovation, and it's fun, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
End of days.
The freedom of speech is being taken away.
What if they capture somewhere after they die? Do you believe in heaven?
Whatever. Anybody. We don't care if it's true. Just say it, sell it.
That Michael
Anything you practice, you'll get good at. Including
Was it 1997, Michael? Anil?
And welcome to a brand new life, to a brand new day, all the way from the wastelands of California. My name is Michael, and I'm a mere figment of your imagination. I look forward to once again serve you those sounds of salvation. First-time listeners, turn on, tune in, and drop out. This is a different kind of show, a place where we don't feel so alone. Let us chase away the light no matter what you at home choose to believe. I do admire you for your curiosity. Live and direct right now on the TuneIn Radio app. Search End of Days and you'll find the 24/7 network. My guest tonight is James Fetzer. Jim is a former Marine Corps officer, has published widely on the theoretical foundations of scientific knowledge, computer science, artificial intelligence, cognitive science, and evolution and mentality. McKnight Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota Duluth. He has also conducted extensive research into the assassination of JFK, the events of 9/11, amongst many, many more. And of course, he is a proud affiliate of this program. You can find his work at moonrockbooks.com. Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me into your hearts and into your minds. Here we are again on a night like this. Welcome back to another dose of the Michael Deacon program. Tonight will be a bit of a rattlesnake, I do promise you that. Always an honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you to those listening here in America and those who listen outside of America, of course. Thank you for your great support. For those who are new in attendance, let me remind you that this is a call-in show, and that number is 760-332-8724. One more time, 760-332-8724. Now, I'm pretty sure the guest is awaiting. Jim, are you there?
I am here, Michael.
My goodness. Thanks for being here. Always an honor and pleasure to have you on the program, Jim.
Well, I'm fascinated by your suggestion that you have received criticism for featuring me, so I'm eager to discuss it. I believe in tackling these things head on.
Oh, yes. Jim, and I'm so glad you said that. And by the way, the last time you were here, you joined me for the interview with Mr. John Lear.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. John was on. Yeah, he's a terrific guy. I so admire him.
That was fun, right?
Sure.
That was a great time. And yes, hopefully we could do that again in the near future. And Jim, I must say, I've gotten so much criticism for having you on this program. You and Mr. Robert David Steele are amongst the most who I believe I get the most criticism about.
Well, that's very interesting because Robert David Steele, seems to me, has been blowing some major whistles and outing a lot of government malfeasance. So the fact that the two of us are being attacked here suggests a pattern of an effort to suppress the truth being revealed about some major cons perpetrated by the government or its subordinates on the American people.
Yes, it's really interesting. And everyone knows, well, you put yourself out there and everyone kind of knows exactly who you are. So why anyone would suggest the things that they do is beyond me, sir.
Well, tell me, if they really had something serious, they'd give you specific points on which he or I are supposed to be wrong. They'd give reasons for how they know we're wrong. But I'm going to venture the guess that you're not getting that at all. Instead, you're receiving generalized, vague smears, suggesting I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a kook. I'm a nut. I mean, and the same things or similar things are being said of Robert David Steele.
That's exactly it. I've been getting those messages privately on Twitter, and then once I blocked that individual, even after I explained to him exactly who you were and what you stand for, he decided to email me, which is just ridiculous. He started up again.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to disclose the names here, but there are some, shills out there who are regular. It appears that The government has a whole host of these people. There's some in relation to Sandy Hook who have proven to be especially obnoxious. One of them, Lenny Pozner, who claims to be the father of Noah, most unusual little boy, who not only reportedly died in Newtown on the 14th of December 2012, but again in Pakistan on the 16th of December 2014, who sent a death certificate to Kelly Watt after she'd spent 100 hours conversing with him and explained she didn't believe a word he said. She didn't believe he had a son, didn't believe he died. And would you believe what he sent to her was a fabrication, the bottom half of a bona fide birth certificate, the top half of a fake, didn't have a file number, didn't even have the right estimated time of death because it stated 11 a.m. when the shooting was taking place between 9:30 and 9:35. Needless to add, if he had had a son who had died at Sandy Hook, he would have been able to send a real death certificate, not a fake one, which demonstrates in and of itself that the whole thing is an elaborate charade. And where, Michael, we've been able to prove that they fabricated the kids out of photographs of older children when they were younger. In the case of Noah Pozner, he was fabricated out of photographs of Michael Wagner, who was purported to be his older stepbrother. And for anyone who wants to review the rather thorough study we did of this, check out Sandy Hook Charade. Noah Pozner was Michael Wagner as a child. And, you know, so many elements of this case converge. In fact, I was going to mention to you, Michael, that among my most recent blogs is one that went up today. Sandy Hook, the James Tracy trial is going to the jury. Here's what you need to know. If you enter that title or just put in, you know, jamesfetzer.blogspot.com Sandy Hook or jamesfetzer.blogspot.com James Tracy, you're probably going to get it right away. Because I thought it would be useful for us to go through to review some of the most powerful proofs we have that this whole thing was a hoax on the American people and has been a very costly one for the public because they have contributed somewhere between $27 and $130 million in donations, which have been divided by the 26 families purporting to have lost friends or loved ones. And that works out to in excess of $1 million apiece for feigning to be the parents of a child who died during a FEMA drill, Michael. It's stunning to me.
Right. And
I mean, the price of crisis actors is fairly astronomical in the case of Sandy Hook. But it was all coming, you see, not out of the government's pocket, but out of the pockets of decent, ordinary, hardworking Americans who were taken in by the emotional impact. This was a very cleverly designed scam to maximize emotional impact. People, Michael, get just as emotional about Sandy Hook, you know, explanations, denials that anyone died there as do the fans of the Beatles become emotional over the idea that Paul died on, ironically, 9/11, 1966 and was replaced by an even better musician. And I can give you absolute technical forensic proof that that has happened. So, you know.
Yes.
And what we have here on this blog, I'd love to go through with you, Michael.
We definitely will, but I wanted to backtrack just really quickly here. I did find some of those messages. I thought I had deleted those, but I'll definitely send you a thorough copy of it. But one of the things they said was, why did you interview John Lear? He is a liar and a deceiver. Be careful, and so is James Fetzer. And he says, I'm telling you for your own good, if they are on the CIA's payroll to spread false information or not, I obviously don't know, but they both spread lies.
Michael, this is just crap.
Outrageous.
I'd like this person to show me one lie they claim I have spread. They probably can't even define what it is to tell a lie, because to tell a lie, you have to be asserting something that is false, that you know to be false, and yet you go ahead and assert it anyway with the deliberate intent of misleading your audience. John Lear and I may have some false beliefs. We would be other than human were that not the case.
Sure,
because
right.
The capacity to make mistakes is a criterion of what it is to have a mind. I could explain that in some detail, but I've demonstrated that in my technical philosophical work. So we may have made some mistakes, but to suggest Don Lear or I are a liar or more absurdly on the payroll of the CIA is simply mendacious. I mean, the word for it is stupefying for the following reason, which ought to be very obvious at this point in time, Michael.
It's pretty fallacious to make up those kind of things.
Well, I've been spending 25 years outing the government over JFK, 9/11, Wellstone, Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, Dallas and Orlando, the moon landings, more recently Charlottesville. I'm doing a book on Las Vegas right now. I mean, look, if I were working for the government, I'd have to be the most counterproductive, the least successful in the history, because I've been outing the government again and again and again and again. And for this person to be implying I'm on the government payroll, I mean, that's just moronic.
Yeah, you weren't a shill, especially, yes, you weren't a shill for any kind of CIA psyop, and you were even on Fox News bearing them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think my first interview with Ole North was such a complete sensation. I was able to take control. A friend of mine noticed Ole wasn't back on TV for about 5 years after I dispatched him during that show in June of 2006.
Right, and so that's why I had emailed you once you sent me one of your blog posts through an email about this gentleman who interviewed you and also had interviewed you before with, I guess he had, Miss, Judy Wood on the phone.
Oh, let's see. That was, I believe it was Bob Tuscan. This was a real odd thing. Judy Wood, by the way, has sicked her hounds on me thousands of times. Now, this sounds like an exaggeration, but actually it's an underestimate, and it's a completely indefensible. Talk about showing ingratitude. I was the person who put Judy Wood on the map. I interviewed her, and to my knowledge, I'm the first to interview her on, I believe it was 11th of November, 2006. The first of what would be 15 different interviews I do with Judy Wood. I was pioneering the interactive use of the radio and the computer, because I would take our viewers, our listeners, to her blog, and we'd go through her blog, and Judy would talk about her findings and results, and I did it not once, not twice. I did it 15 times. Here's another point. When I organized the first conference on 9/11 sponsored by scholars, which was held in Madison in 2007, entitled The Science and Politics of 9/11. I gave Judy Wood an unprecedented 3 hours to speak. Now, Michael, I've given, conferences and participated all over the world. I mean,
understood. Yes.
Probably 100 by conservative estimate. No one is ever given 3 hours to speak. But I gave Judy Wood 3 hours to speak. I gave her attorney Jerry Liepart, whom I regard as a very fine man, the opportunity to speak. I gave Morgan Reynolds, who's a close ally of hers, the opportunity to speak. So, how she can, send out her attack dogs, and one of them uses the name Emmanuel Goldstein, and, regularly shows up on my blogs, on my videos, whatever, to harass me.
Yeah, I think I've seen that name.
When I received a particularly vicious attack from one Thomas Potter, who's a spokesman for Judy, I drafted a rather thoroughgoing response and hit reply all, because it had been sent to a list of about 10. And one of them bounced, Michael, and it bounced from the ADL. So that's where Judy Wood is coming from. She's part of the Anti-Defamation League, which is the intellectual attack arm of the Mossad. And of course they're attacking me because I make no bones about the fact that Israel was complicit in 9/11. For that reason, I and Christopher Bolin and Kevin Barrett and Gordon Duff and Alan Sabrowski, among others, have been demonized. In fact, 4 of us were on a hit list put out by the ADL for anti-Semitic and 9/11 conspiracy theorists. But Michael, I don't make any assertions where I haven't already done the research,
That's
or
true.
else I
Yes.
specifically state that this is a speculation. The research I've done demonstrating Israel's complicity in 9/11 can be found online. Go to the Brian Ruhe, R-U-H-E. Just put in Brian Ruhe, R-U-H-E, 9/11, and you'll have it a 2-hour comprehensive overview that demonstrates that all 4 of the planes, their crashes were all fabrications, all fakery. 2 of them weren't even in the air that day. Flight 11, North Tower, Flight 77, Pentagon. The other 2 pilots for 9/11 Truth was able to track based upon air-ground communication and found that one of them was over Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, after it had allegedly crashed in Shanksville. The other was over Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, long after it had allegedly hit the South Tower, where I obtained FAA registration records and was able to establish that the planes used for those flights, and remember, the same aircraft could today fly from Miami to Chicago, tomorrow from New York to LA, were not even taken out of service or formally deregistered until 28 September 2005. So how can planes that weren't even in the air have crashed on 9/11? And how can planes that crashed on 9/11 have still been in the air 4 years later? I mean, the whole thing is absurd. David Ray Griffin, by the way, in his magisterial work, the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, makes as his very first point that 6 or 7 of these guys turned up alive and well the following day and made contact with the media in the United Kingdom, which means, of course, they didn't commandeer planes and cause them to crash. It also means that no passengers died on planes that did not crash. It means that the whole war on terror is predicated on a false proposition. But Judy's attacking me primarily for having observed that her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, although it appears to give an argument to rule out the use of large nukes, does not dispense with the use of a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes, where I pointed out that the U.S. Geological Survey conducted dust studies from 35 locations in Manhattan and turned up with a whole host of elements that would not have been present had this not been a nuclear event, including barium, lithium, strontium, thorium, uranium, lanthanum, yttrium, chromium, tritium. Some of these, Michael, only exist in radioactive form.
That's true.
But Judy Wood, who pretends to be a scientist, is unwilling to accommodate this new data, which means she's really perpetrating a fraud on the public by pretending to be a scientist.
This was on the Pete Santilli show, right?
Pardon me?
It was Pete Santilli.
Oh, I'll come back to that.
Oh, okay, we'll go around there.
Here is Judy Wood pretending to be a scientist, but scientists know you have to revise your position. You have to reject hypotheses you previously accepted, accept hypotheses you previously rejected, and leave others on suspense when you're confronted with additional new information. But she has never responded to this USGS dust study information. So before I conducted the conference known as the Vancouver hearings in 2012, by the way, which was the second conference sponsored by Scholar. In spite of the fact that we'd had a falling out like around, I think it must have been 2008, when she was on with John Hutchison, who claims to have made all these astounding discoveries and levitating metals and all that sort of thing in his garage. Mm-hmm. Michael, I asked him what I thought was a completely innocuous question, to wit, what was his background with respect to, science and physics, because these all fall in the area of electromagnetism, which is among the most complex in physics. And he just sloughed it off. He said he flunked crayons and coloring books, which Judy thought was hilarious, but I regard it as infantile. And I moved on to another topic because obviously he wasn't going to answer my question.
Yes.
But in spite of this, and that Judy Wood has cut me off completely and continued to sick her attack dogs on me ever since. Before the Vancouver hearing, I invited Judy to be a speaker. I invited John Hutchison to be a speaker. Hutchison had actually agreed to do it. I mean, he resides not all that far from Vancouver. But Judy obviously got a hold of him and cut him off. In fact, there was another physicist who had agreed to speak too, and that Judy, wound up strong-arming not to participate in the conference. I believe in bringing all points of view together.
Right.
And, hashing it out based upon the evidence using reason and rationality, which is the core of scientific method. But these groups, and I don't mean to fault only Judy and her do group, who are unwilling to address who is responsible and why, but also that's true of architects and engineers led by Richard Gage.
I can't deny that, by the way. I've spoken to Richard about this issue, and of course I got no answer.
No, he claims that their charter restricts them to how it was done, but he has a hopelessly inadequate theory of how it was done. He is still reiterating the use of nanothermite, which T. Mark Hightower, who's a chemical engineer, had established back in 2011. We published 3 different articles about it. One was entitled, "Is 9/11 Truth Based Upon a False Theory?" Another was entitled, "If it doesn't fit, nanothermite, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit." We discovered that nanothermite simply doesn't have the explosive power to blow apart the building. I mean, it has 1/13 the explosive force of TNT, which would mean, roughly speaking, you need 13 times as much nanothermite as you would TNT to achieve the same explosive effect. So why in the world would anyone want to resort to nanothermite? In fact, one of the proponents of the nanothermite theory, a guy from Copenhagen, Niels Harrit, when asked how much nanothermite would it take to blow apart one of the twin towers of 500,000-ton steel and concrete building, he gave the answer, staggering, 29,000 metric tons. 29,000 metric tons.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That is mind-boggling.
Yes. It really is. It really is. And of course, I've always kind of been put off by Judy, especially the email exchanges we've had. She came off kind of bad in that whole dialogue we had, unfortunately.
Putting it bluntly, she's a nasty piece of work.
Yes.
And
I'm being polite. I'm being polite tonight.
2 different occasions where I
Yes.
had direct encounters with her after she cut me off. One was on the Bob Tuskin show where she was appearing. And I called in and I asked her, why does she deny she has a theory? Because Judy goes out of her way to claim again and again and again she doesn't have a theory when it says right on the cover of her book, evidence of the use of direct energy, free energy technology on 9/11. Well,
That's
then
correct,
her
yes.
theory obviously is that free energy technology was used on 9/11. Why not say that? And would you believe, I mean, this is to me so totally repulsive. This woman even said to the host that my calling in to ask her that question was like her having to confront a rapist.
Oh, yes.
I mean, Michael, yeah, this is so crude. This is so below the belt. This is so unscrupulous. And let me give you another hint. Judy Wood has made up the image of a clown that she has named after me. You can find online. I mean, it's Fetzer the Clown.
Oh,
and
no.
This is her theory. This is how she deals with me in a rational, scientific, objective fashion. She makes a little cartoonish image of a clown and names it after me. I mean, that's Judy Wood. The other case you're talking about was where I was on the Pete Santilli show.
Correct.
And this was, I'm trying to think, it was maybe 2016, I'm going to guess. Early, I'm going to guess. And it turned out that Pete just kept asking me the same questions over and over again. There were 4 or 5, but they were the same questions. It went on for 2 solid hours, Michael, of him asking me the same questions over and over. It turned out that Judy Wood was on Skype telling him what to ask. He lost his producer over this. Suzanne Bozell quit working with Pete Santilli because of this absurdity.
Yeah, that's pretty awful to do.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I was not going to hang up on him, even though that was the objective, because I knew that they'd say Fetzer ran away from the hard questions about 9/11. Well, it was stupid. It was just harassment, pure, utter harassment. It was the single most unpleasant interview I ever had, and it was all a setup and worked out between Santilli and Judy in advance.
Yeah, it was an ambush.
Yeah, it was an ambush, but I mean, I was damned if I was going to, abandon the field. So I just kept repeating my answers and explain you're asking the same question for 2 hours.
Yeah, if they thought they were going to get you in any certain way, they were just wrong. I mean, you face some of the biggest names out there. So I mean, it's kind of funny that they would even try to do that to you.
By the way, I've published a lot about, Judy and AME 9/11. You can find it, for example, online. I did the Midwest 9/11 Truth Conference. It may have been in 2014, which was held in Champaign-Urbana. And it was just a 3-hour deal where I used the first hour to play A&E's video called Explosive Evidence, okay, because they're claiming,
right.
Found these pink and red little globs of whatever, and that's supposed to be explosive nanothermite, so that's the evidence it's explosive, right? In the second hour, I gave a critique. I just went through the whole program and showed what was wrong about it and how Stephen Jones was even advancing phony evidence. I mean, I called him in on this at a conference out in Chandler on 9/11. And the third hour was Wayne Madsen talking about a couple of peripheral characters who seemed to have had some role, but it was never completely clear to me how it all fit together with regard to Wayne's contribution. What you want to see is the Midwest 9/11 Truth Conference Part 2, but that's from the first conference because I more recently put together a virtual conference, the Midwest 9/11 Truth Conference 2, Roman numeral 2, which has 14 hours. In other words, the first one only has 3 hours, and what's important is the second segment. This has 14 different segments, some of which are 2 hours long, and you can find it online on my blog. Part 1 is about how it was done, and I include multiple engineers there, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, others who were in a good position to address these issues. And Part 2 is about who was responsible and why. And then, of course, to cap all that off, I have a new book about 9/11 that was just published here during 2017. America Nuked on 9/11, Compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the DOD, and the Mossad.
We can find it on moonrockbooks.com, correct?
That's right. It's
okay.
got like 15 contributors. See, this is another point for these people who want to criticize me, Michael. My work is collaborative. I have the good sense to bring in people who are expert in areas where I myself am not expert.
Yeah, that's very smart.
I have done this from the beginning. When I first began doing work on JFK, I was collaborating with a world authority on the human brain who was also an expert on wound ballistics, a PhD in physics who was also an MD and board certified in radiation oncology, which is a treatment of cancer using X-ray therapy, a physician who actually had been in trauma room 1 when JFK's moribund body was brought in, and then 2 days later was responsible for the care and treatment of his alleged assassin, Lee Oswald, a legendary photo and film analyst, another PhD in physics, this time with a specialty in electromagnetism, the properties of light and of images of moving objects, John P. Costello, the last mentioned, who did brilliant work exposing internal proofs internal to the extant version of the Zapruder film, that it was a fabrication, where John has explained how it's 98% technically perfect, but the other 2% give it away. And we're based on additional research from external sources, comparisons of the Zapruder with the Nix film, for example. You find Jackie goes further out on the trunk and Clint Hill further in contact with Jackie in the Nix than in the Zapruder. We have persons who have seen, what appears to have been the original film. They only refer to it as another film, not wanting to go so far as to maintain it was the original, but where you can see the turn from Houston on to M, and you can see the limo stop where everyone's jostled and thrown forward, and that Jack is hit twice in the head during the limo stop, which was made to make sure he would be dead. We have then the medical and the ballistic evidence to put it all together, where I've given a reconstruction of JFK that brings things very nearly up to date online. Again, at Brian Rue, coincidentally, RUHE, JFK, who was responsible and why, a 2-hour comprehensive overview. But the book is there as well. And I have a brand new blog about JFK that brings us absolutely current. So between the book and the blog, you know what we know about JFK. I mean, it's just astounding, you know.
It really is.
So people who are going to criticize me, Michael, what are they also criticizing in the case of Sandy Hook, the dozen other contributors, in the case of 9/11, the 14 other contributors, in the case of my 3 earlier books about JFK? I mean, I must have 20 different contributors. I mean, for God's sake. But what they've got, that's just why I challenge them to be specific.
I'm not sure the CIA would let you put out this kind of information if you worked for them.
I'm sorry?
I said, I don't think the CIA would allow you to put out this kind of information if you worked for them. I'm
blowing these things apart right and left.
Yes.
You know, with a force of the experts I bring together in all these cases. I bring together the best, most competent students. I mean, get this, in relation to the book on Sandy Hook, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, which was banned by Amazon.
That's true.
Less than a month after it went on sale, Michael, and it had sold nearly 500 copies. I mean, it was going to be a runaway bestseller, so they had to stop it. I have 13 contributors, 6 of whom are current or retired PhD university professors. Why would any of us put our reputation if we didn't believe in what we were doing? I have, one of them had published, believe it or not, 80 articles about Sandy Hook before I edited the book. I myself had published 30 articles about Sandy Hook before I edited the book. So, I mean, you know, I've been doing my homework, and I think it becomes very, very obvious when you have people coming up with vague general smears on me or John Lear. For God's sake, he's our nation's most distinguished pilot. He may even still hold 15 international speed records.
I believe he does, yes.
Qualified in every area of flight and maintenance. I mean, he's a national treasure. And for them to make John or me out to be stooges of the CIA, that's an obscenity.
It really is. It's quite idiotic that they would make those assumptions. And, of course, they are just baseless accusations. And, of course, I myself have been accused of working for the CIA. Well, I'm sure the pay is fantastic. I can reassure all of you out there that that's not my gig.
Well, of course, Michael, you would feature me on your show, for crying out loud.
No, of course
I mean,
not.
You know, I'm blowing these things apart. I mean, is that what they think that a stooge for the agency would be doing, exposing all their shenanigans, showing that Lyndon Johnson was a pivotal player in the assassination of JFK, that Edgar used the FBI to cover it up, that, you know, there were...
Yeah, well, these baseless accusations, they come with the territory.
They do. They do. I accept that. I just believe in addressing them directly and dismembering them just as I...
Oh, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that, Jim. I'm going to do a lot of that later on in the second half. Lots of names I'm going to cut through. So I know what you mean.
Well, it's ridiculous. It's not just objectionable. It's deceitful, and it's plain, you know, to a naive audience who doesn't really know my work. I mean, they think they get an advantage because if people aren't familiar with my work, you know.
I think a lot of these are first-time listeners, Jim, and they get kind of rambunctious with what you got to say, and then they go a little crazy.
Well, if this is coming from someone who's naive, that is less offensive to me than coming from somebody who's practiced, which is my experience. I mean, I have some of these people attacking me again and again and again. I started to mention about Judy Wood. Before the Vancouver hearing held in June of 2012, I posted a review of her book, Where Did the Towers Go, on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, it was a 5-star review. I explained that I thought she'd done a brilliant job of gathering, you know, the best collection of photographs, documents, records related to 9/11 that had appeared in print, but that I did feel that while she had ruled out the use of large nukes, she hadn't ruled out mini or micro nukes. I proceeded to the conference in Vancouver, and when I returned, I discovered that my review, mind you, had been attacked thousands of times. I think at that point it was probably something like 2,400 times by followers of Judy who are incensed that I would suggest she didn't have everything exactly right. So I pondered the situation, realized, well, look, I've got during the conference, so much more evidence was presented that it had been a nuclear event, including the U.S. geological dust studies with which I had not been familiar prior to the conference. that I rewrote it, downgraded it to a 3-star, and added, the specific elements from the U.S. Geological Survey that she was not taking into account. And would you believe today, if you go onto Amazon.com, you're going to find that review. This is my review now. This is not her book. My review has been attacked over 7,000 times.
That's a lot of times.
It's just absurd.
It really is. And by the way, you just reminded me of something else about Judy Wood. She was not recently, I'm not exactly quite sure how accurate. I know the date of when this interview happened, so I'm not going to quite say. I need to look into it again, but she conducted some sort of interview with, I think someone named Andrew Johnson about the wildfires. I think sometime in October it was. I should really pull that article up, but they had questioned her about the possibility of these fires being started by directed energy weapons. And she kind of just blatantly said no.
Repeat that, Michael.
Oh, well, she had conducted an interview in regards to the wildfires out here in California, and the interviewer asked her about the possibility of these fires being the result of directed energy weapons, and she sort of downplayed it completely.
Well, that's ridiculous. It's clear that they are the effect of directed energy weapons. I mean, you have house after house where the house itself is completely destroyed, and yet the trees, the major large trees surrounding the house are completely undamaged. Now this tells you that Judy Wood is a shill. I have been suspicious, Michael, that Israel is at war with the United States. They're so unhappy that we didn't deliver Syria to Israel on a platter that they have been conducting a whole host of treacherous acts intended to undermine the United States and eventually basically destroy it piece by piece. In fact, I've even got a quote here I'll pull up where Bibi Netanyahu in 2000 is saying exactly that's his intention. That's what they're planning to do. It's completely disgraceful. But among the events that it seems to me they are responsible for are these odd collisions off the coast of Japan in the Pacific. We've had several very sophisticated, destroyers, frigates that are high wire act. They have the most advanced technology. They know everything going on in the air, on the water, beneath the water. And they've been involved in collisions with slow lumbering cargo ships. That's impossible. I've spent a huge amount of time aboard Navy ships when I was in the Marine Corps, more time than I would have preferred. But the fact of the matter is that these are just bristling with electronics. Their whole purpose in being there is know where everything is at every moment, 24/7. It's
Correct.
not as though the crew all sacks out at the same time.
Yeah, and no one even sleeps there, from what I
know.
can recall.
It's just lunatic. Then we have these hurricanes. Those are man-made, hitting Houston, hitting Puerto Rico. I'm very puzzled about the Puerto Rico thing. It looks as though this may have been an exercise in determining what happens when you take out the electrical grid for a large segment, and the island was a perfect pilot study. Hitting Houston, these fires, the sonic attacks in Cuba. Those are truly bizarre, Michael, because, how the Donald could think that Cuba would have anything to do with it when Cuba's been waiting 50 years to have improved relations with the United States. And now that improved relations are here, the idea they would use these high frequency sonic attacks to cause it to fall apart is just ludicrous. But the Israelis, they don't want there to be a rapprochement between the United States and a communist country. That would too much invite, the closer relations between the U.S. and Russia, which are doing everything they can to sabotage. So I think the fact that Judy Wood is denying the use of directed energy weapons in a case where, in my opinion, it's obvious. The evidence is overwhelming.
Jim, by the way, I sent you the article there.
Wow, this impugns her integrity. It just impugns her integrity beyond belief.
Yeah, you got to listen to that interview whenever you get the chance. There's clip notes there on that article, which I found pretty fascinating. Of course, the author of that post there was not very happy with Wood, which I'm sure you wouldn't be either.
Well, I'm most certainly not happy with Judy Wood at this point in time. I mean, she's thrown away any claim she may have had to scientific standing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm looking for this statement by Bibi about wanting to dismember the United States. I mean, it's really a pretty shocking statement, and I want to find it before we conclude our conversation this evening, because I do want to take you to this blog of mine. It's one of the last two, entitled Sandy Hook, the James Tracy Trials Going to the Jury. Here's what you need to know, because there are shills at work as we speak right now. I mean, they're posting, right now as we speak. And I just want to go through some of these to demonstrate, how desperate they are. Apparently they're very, very worried that the truth about Sandy Hook is coming out, and I can assure you there are some developments that are very significant here, including, for example, that Lenny Pozner, who pretends to be the father of Noah, whom we've been able to establish was made up out of photographs of Michael Wagner, who's supposed to be his older stepbrother when he was younger, withdrew his lawsuit against Wolfgang Halbig after the judge directed him to sit for a video deposition. Lenny is a very spooky guy. I mean, he appears to me to be working for the government. There may actually be more than one person who's playing the role of Lenny Pozner. He's been attacking websites that deal with Sandy Hook, trying to conceal it. And I don't think it's only because he might have to give back the over $1 million that he received as pretending to be a parent, but that he might also be prosecuted for fraud or theft by deception, because none of these kids died. Nobody died at Sandy Hook.
Have you talked to Wolfgang, by the way?
Yes. But I mean, Lenny withdrew his lawsuit at the last moment at 4:59 p.m. Eastern time, before he'd have to go forward with a deposition. And Wolf is, making progress. It's like the tortoise and the hare. He's real gradual, very slow, but he's been making steady progress. And I've been very supportive of Wolfgang for that.
Yes, you have. You've been very supportive of him. And by the way, Jim, I didn't get to have this little segment with you here, but as 2017 comes to a close, I think it's been a tremendous year, not for everyone, but of course, I think this has been very entertaining, especially in the political realm. I don't remember any other time it's been this entertaining and chaotic, and it's been a sensory overload in my opinion, Jim.
Well, there's been a lot of nonsense going on, including Charlottesville. I think we discussed that on an earlier program, Michael, yes, where there were 2 cars and 2 drivers and 2 or even 3 takes. I have published more about Charlottesville too, because they had an official report from a former U.S. attorney, and he committed blunders. I mean, I've outed him for 3 massive blunders that he made, so we can go there too, because it's also highly instructive. And let me pull that up here.
Yeah, we go all over the place here. It's okay.
Yeah, let me find this one. Yeah,
go
3
ahead.
Massive blunders in the independent report on Charlottesville by Timothy Heapfey. I went through the report and I just pulled out some killers. I mean, these are major blunders, meaning if these are wrong, then he doesn't know what he's talking about, and these are wrong. 1, James Alex Fields was not the driver. He cites sources to claim that this guy, this 20-year-old who was supposed to be schizophrenic on antidepressant medication, wearing prescription glasses, was a driver. But we have the image of the driver, and it isn't him. It's this other guy, this 32-year-old combat veteran who commands a battalion in Ohio. Secondly, he claims that Heather Heyer died in the crash. But we even have her mother acknowledging she died from a heart attack, and it appears to have happened the following day. I have this absolutely brilliant woman doing research on Las Vegas and all of the obituaries there, where she has turned up again and again and again that they were for people who died in different states or on different dates or for different causes of death. So they use that right here, that technique right here in Charlottesville. And then they have the third claim he makes that it's a colossal blunder, that 2 state troopers died in a helicopter crash. We have photographs of them in their flight uniforms after the crash. I even added a video where you can see them walking and talking after the crash. And I just tell you, if this guy is no more competent than this, I mean, bear in mind, this is like the FBI in relation to the Boston bombing. The alternative media cracked the Boston bombing the night of the event. The FBI is still insisting that the Saranov brothers did it when it was the Kraft International personnel. We got them going toward one of the bomb sites wearing a black nylon backpack with a white square. The bomb that blows up is a black nylon backpack with a white square. He's rushing away, no longer wearing the black nylon backpack with a white square. And when they photoshopped in, and they did this, and it's just incredible that they would have mucked this up. But they photoshopped the brothers in, but they were not wearing black nylon backpacks. So here got the FBI reporting that the 2 bombs that exploded were in black nylon backpacks, but you can see the images the government itself photoshopped in, and Zoker is wearing a silver backpack, and Tamerlan is wearing gray or beige. Neither of them is wearing a black nylon backpack. So get this, and this is new since we last spoke, Michael. John Remington Graham has made a submission to have an amicus curiae, friend of the court brief, admitted to the appeals court, and it has been granted. And he cited 3 experts who are willing to testify on this case, and I'm very proud that I'm one of the 3. The fact that the court has accepted this is historic. It's never happened before in American jurisprudence. It's going to turn the case inside out. Because as Jack has observed, if the backpacks don't match, then there wasn't even probable cause for an arrest, much less an indictment and a conviction at trial, even in the formal indictment of Zoker for the committing the Boston bombings. It states that the 2 bombs that are exploded were in black nylon backpacks, and he was not wearing one, nor was his older brother Tamerlan.
Yes, it's quite interesting the way all of this has been going down, especially here in 2017. As I was just saying, it's been a remarkable year, and especially in terms of, like I said, the political realm, it's been very entertaining for everyone out there, and I think it's really gained lots of popularity amongst those who weren't even paying attention to this a few years ago. It seems like everyone now has an opinion.
Yeah, well, if we do go to the blog about Sandy Hook, I can make some nice illustrations about shills and trolls at work that I think fit exactly the theme we've been addressing here during our prior conversation, Michael.
Yes, lots of false flags as well. And
it's bizarre because I present conclusive proof, and you see people squirming and wiggling and trying to evade its impact. Have you gone to the blog there? Do you see what I'm talking about for December 7th?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, you notice, according to Florida Atlantic University, FAU professor wasn't fired because of his Sandy Hook blog, according to the Sun Sentinel. According to the Sun Sentinel, James Tracy was fired as a tenured associate professor because he didn't submit forms about his outside activities. But the university was under pressure from the local community and donors to remove him because they objected to the content of his blog. After 35 years as a faculty member in institutions of higher learning, I have never heard of such an absurdity. If he failed to submit forms, he might deserve a reprimand, maybe a letter in his file, Michael, but not removal from a tenured position. I mean, this is just ludicrous. The fact that FAU has committed a major violation of his freedom of research is thereby shown conclusively, in my opinion. And get this, he had the close of the presentation of evidence on Friday, and the judge ruled, to the great disenchantment of the defenders of Florida Atlantic, that James Tracy's blog was published in his role as a private citizen, and he was entitled to, the protections that attend thereto. And, this thing is going to fall apart. I don't know if you fully absorbed what I said about the appeals court accepting this amicus curiae brief from John Remington Grant, who's retired professor of law. Michael, this has never happened before in American jurisprudence, that an amicus curiae brief would be accepted by an appeals court. that's going to overturn the entire trial. I mean, this is going to have vast repercussions. This is an historic event, and it's a done deal, meaning the brief is in the formal record.
Good Lord. Yes, lots to take in. And of course, if you want to follow along, that's jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. People were wondering where they could find these articles.
Oh, yeah, right. jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. Just go there, start working backwards. You have to go to the menu bar on the right, the blog archive, but just start working backwards. The Sandy Hook one is the second most recent. And Michael, let's talk about see, I put in all these proofs right there, embedded them in the article, where we see the policewoman even rearrange the kids to get a better shot. This is the top is the photograph that went around the world. It turns out that Shannon Hicks had taken a second photograph earlier, and you can clearly see that they rearranged the kids. So you had this originally, this little girl in a pink sweater and a short skirt, but she's replaced by a little boy in a blue sweater and blue jeans. And look at the second photograph taken earlier. There are parents present. I mean, how absurd is that? Parents are just casually looking on with their arms folded, hands in their pocket. You got a couple in the background there in between the arrows pointing to boy number 1 and boy number 2, looking on so casually. I refer to this as lounging at the massacre. But get this now, if you go down to the comments, you got here, the very first comment, anonymous, of course, anonymous. The Shannon Hicks photo you use has been thoroughly debunked in the link posted the other day. It's no less than the first point listed. Don't you read? The FEMA manual is debunked at the same link. This is ridiculous. I point out preposterous. Shannon Hicks wrote to confirm she took both photos. How could they have been debunked? I'm sorry, but coming here to lie through your teeth is nothing for your attempts to defend the indefensible. I am fairly stunned that you would even try to pull this. The photos were obviously taken at approximately the same time, and the one with the girl in the pink sweater was taken before the second with a little boy in a blue sweater and blue jeans. You have a lot of gall to make such blatant false claims here. And he says the debunking is of the claim that they rearranged the children. It's not that Hicks didn't take both pictures or claims he didn't rearrange the children to get a better shot. The children, they say, were rearranged in the two because if you get a clear photo, there are different children. But go back up, Michael, to the photograph. You can see we got boy number 1 in the earlier photograph at the bottom, back in the middle, right in the virtual middle, and he's the same boy who's then put up in the front.
Right. And
you got a boy number 2 who's identified in both photos as well. I mean, the gall of these people to post these blatant lies, Michael, it just dumbfounds me.
This is why I always say that the word journalism now is a very dirty word in this day and age.
Journalism, yeah, we don't have any. We have nothing but fake news coming from the mainstream media, and that's why the alternative media, including shows like this, are such a serious threat, because we're actually getting at the truth.
And we're censored. We're censored at times, James. Like one of our last episodes we did, YouTube pulled that one down right away.
Well, you see, they've got algorithms, and if you're talking about a subject they want to suppress, they're gonna do something virtually immediately. But go down to the next image I give you. There you can see how Michael Wagner was made out of photographs. Noah Pozner was made out of photographs of his older stepbrother, Michael Wagner.
Yeah, there's
you see Noah Pozner turn into Michael Wagner.
Yep, I'm looking at it now.
Right there.
Yep. Wow.
And we've got a whole article about it. They have the same ears, they have the same eyes, they have the same eyebrows, they have the same nose. They have the same shape of the skull. Go to Sandy Hook charade. Noah Pozner was Michael Wagner as a child, and it blows the entire case apart.
Yes. Now, Jim, I know we are coming to a close here, but again, I do want to get your opinions just a little bit more so on Donald Trump. Let's talk a little bit about the Donald.
So we're only doing an hour tonight, Michael?
Well, we could go a little bit longer. It's okay.
Well, I was prepared. I told my wife I'd be on for 2 with you, so it's up to you. But I mean, I'm pleased to be here.
Okay, well, we could do 2, but yeah.
Well, the Donald has committed a massive blunder with this business about Jerusalem. I mean, I cannot believe he has discredited himself. He has discredited the United States, which no longer has any moral authority. Frankly, I find it completely embarrassing. And you'll see actually the first blog I put up today is actually authored by Patrick McShay, Trump and Netanyahu, Palestine and Jerusalem, Haley and Kushner, what's really going on. I liked it a lot, and I embedded several videos, one where I gave a presentation to the Left Forum last year about how ISIS was made in the USA. And apparently there was a reaction to that, so they didn't invite me back this year. But then they didn't invite a number of others who conducted their own alternative Left Forum. The second is about, I was interviewed about Trump by Press TV, and that's the second of these interviews. And frankly, I damn Donald Trump to hell for making this decision. I mean, I want him to rot in hell for eternity with Donald Trump. This is such a calamitous decision. It has discredited the United States in the eyes of the world. No one is ever again going to believe the United States is a fair and balanced and objective broker of anything. We have squandered our moral authority. We are now perceived as a puppet of Israel. That Donald Trump is, kissing the behind of Bibi Netanyahu, where Israel is the only country who's come out with an approving attitude toward this. Frankly, it's a complete and total disgrace. I voted for Trump for several reasons, even though I had in the past voted Democratic. I voted for Bill Clinton twice. I voted for Barack Obama twice. But it was obvious Hillary was so corrupt. And the fact that we now know that the DNC had sabotaged the campaign of Bernie Sanders, I mean, what a disgrace. Frankly, if Bernie had been allowed to emerge and run as a Democratic candidate, he'd be president of the United States today, because he overlapped with Trump on the crucial issues of the Middle East as a non-interventionist, which was the reason Trump won. A study has been done by Boston University and the University of Minnesota that Trump won because the counties, the rural counties in the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, thought that he was less likely to continue the wars in the Middle East. That was the pivotal issue on which the whole election hung. They had suffered casualties from the Middle East. They didn't like it. They don't like all these wars. That was a pivotal issue. So Hillary can come up with her 44 or 45 or whatever the latest number of excuses for why she lost. She lost because she was perceived in relation to the Middle East as a hawk, and Trump as less hawkish. It was that simple. It was that clear cut, Michael.
Yes, I agree. And of course, I have been criticizing all sides here. I have no dog in the fight, to be honest with all of you out there. I kind of believe both are corrupt. I believe all of these political parties are corrupt to a certain degree, and these people are not to be trusted, in my opinion. But that's just an opinion, of course. And of course, furthermore, I must say, what really bothered me about Donald Trump, and every time I say this, I'm sure lots of people out there probably get upset, but his entire affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein has always bothered me.
Oh, yeah.
It's never not bothered me.
Yeah, I think it's going to come out. I think it's going to eventually come out in the wash.
And anytime, Jim, I bring Jeffrey Epstein up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about all these things here in a moment, but that's always been a red flag, especially having someone, a former CEO from Goldman Sachs affiliated with you, is also pretty troubling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tell you, a weird thing happened today when I was putting up this blog about Trump. The page right in front of me was jumping all over the place. In other words, they've got someone on me in real time who's trying to interfere with my posting the blog. And I had this incredible problem in getting the spacing and the formatting right. In fact, you'll see I eventually had to just post it to get it up, because if I tried to fix the formatting, everything was just jumping around and it was making it worse. They were changing fonts on me. I can't begin to tell you, Michael, how desperate the deep state has become in doing everything they possibly can in order to thwart the truth coming out. And they appear to have made me one of, I'm sure I'm not alone, but one of many special targets.
It's possible. It's possible your computer has been compromised, potentially through email. Maybe you opened a file and opened some sort of backdoor port to your computer, and that's probably what's happening.
Well, I'll do a search. I mean, I have so staggering many files that when I do a security search, it takes quite a while.
Oh yes.
So I want to find an opportunity when I'm not really using it. Let me just mention, by the way, a couple more points about the Sandy Hook blog.
Oh, go ahead.
I also embedded an introduction as to Sandy Hook that I did a couple of years ago, the must-see Sandy Hook update. Actually, there, the version I found was combined with a 1 hour introduction to the Boston bombing, so you get a double benefit. I also show a couple of parts of the FEMA manuals, so you can see what we're talking about. And, it's so obvious when you realize it was a FEMA exercise as to why they had porta potties already in place, why they had pizza and bottled water at the firehouse, why they had so many with name tags on lanyards, why they had a portable sign that said everyone must check in, why there were parents bringing children to the scene. No parent would bring their child to the scene of a child shooting massacre, but this was a rehearsal. So they treated it as a festive occasion, Michael. And it says right in the manual, everyone must check in. In fact, Patricia LaLorda, who's the first select man, that's equivalent to being the mayor of Newtown, acknowledged during one of Wolf Halbig's hearings, this was all sworn testimony, that the sign had been put there by the Department of Homeland Security. Well, the Department of Homeland Security wasn't even supposed to be in the vicinity. This was supposed to be a spontaneous shooting on the official account. And, the name tags on lanyards, that's standard for a FEMA drill. That's how they identify everyone. I mean, it just becomes so blatant. And then I embedded this photograph, which I've been repeatedly referring to as the SWAT team being already there, where you can see just above the roof of the SWAT team the windows of classroom 10, which are obviously not shot out, the flags at full mast. You come into, there's Wayne Carver leaning against his the wall, awaiting the arrival of his portable mortuary tent. There's crime scene tape up for a crime that is yet to be committed. So below that, I showed the windows before and after. We actually have photographs of the perps drilling holes in the window frame and the pink rods extending, where I explained that no one familiar with marksmanship would regard this as anything other than a fantasy. And would you believe, someone calls me out, they say, where is it? Oh, the vehicle, the SWAT vehicle you keep referring to is not SWAT, it's just a CT, a Connecticut Major Crime Squad truck. It's for investigating major crimes. That's not what SWAT does. Just search Connecticut Major Crime Squad. You'll see photos of the truck at various crime scenes, including a search for a missing college student. But the fact of the matter is, it's there before the event takes place. And he says, why do you keep using that small photo for room 10? Why not use the original from the report? But I have. All these images can be expanded. All you have to do is click on them and you'll get them in a larger view. Okay. So I don't know why anyone would suggest I'm not using the larger photographs, because all you do is click on and then you get the images in larger view. So I regarded that as just, I was glad to be corrected. He also claims I say that there was some shooting in 2007, and he says VT, which I take to be Vermont, unless he meant VA, Virginia. Would you have any idea what he's talking about, Michael?
I don't.
Because,
I
there
really
was
don't.
that phony shooting of a woman who was supposed to be doing an interview, a TV interview, on a balcony at a television station in Virginia, but I called that out. That was such a blatant fraud and hoax. You got this huge lumbering guy, over 300-pound black guy, walks up behind her and the cameraman and shoots her point blank. You would have heard him coming. There's no blood. She just runs off. She couldn't run off. If she'd been shot point blank, she'd be dead or dying lying there on the balcony. Yeah, that was such an obvious fraud. Turns out her father is a big gun control, proponent. So
is that why there's been so many false flags to push a certain narrative?
It's got a lot to do with it. I mean, take Las Vegas, for example. I mean, this guy's got a veritable arsenal, in his room, 23 weapons. These are the guns the gun grabbers most want to grab. But, why would he have 23 weapons? I mean, it's simply ridiculous. You'd need one for shooting and something for self-defense. You wouldn't have 23 weapons. The sheriff, by the way, recently announced that he'd fired 1,100 rounds. Well, that means this suite should have been covered with 1,100 shell casings, but they aren't there. Most of the room is virtually bereft of any shell casings, but there's a handful, I'm going to say a couple dozen, thrown down. I mean, this is somebody who's used to setting stages, this is the prop woman, for special effects, for theatrical productions. And she just threw a handful down, and she didn't pay attention to what she was doing, because as Scott Bennett, who's former U.S. Army intel and PSYOPs, has observed, many of them are blanks, which have a crimped end rather than the open end because a lead slug's been fired. Others are CO2 cartridges are used to fire gas-powered pellet guns and the like. I mean, this was just slovenly. And then there's shell casings on top of the blood, but obviously when he blows out his brains, he stops shooting. And therefore, if there were blood in relation to shell casings, the casing should be under the blood, not on top. So the three members of the sheriff, the three top members of the Metropolitan Police Department at Las Vegas are all resigning or retiring here at the end of the year. I think they want to get out of Dodge.
This is a really, really strange shooting, probably the worst mass shooting in American history. And it's 2-3 months removed from the incident, and basically no one's talking about it anymore, which is funny because I said on this program that in 2-3 weeks, everyone would just stop talking about it.
Well, I think that's because we've uncovered so much fraud and deception. We had a military surgeon who's an expert on gunshots who reviewed the videos of the patients in the hospital and concluded they were all actors. None of them had actually been shot, reinforced by an American trauma surgeon who pointed out they weren't even connected to the diagnostic, blood pressure. For goodness sake, I was down at the clinic and they put me on blood pressure right away. And I wasn't even being admitted. I was just being processed and wound up coming home. But the fact is they connect you up right away. None of these are even connected to blood pressure. Then we have a woman, who's gone through 33 of the videos, Michael, and finds lots of sounds of shots, but there are no signs of anyone actually being shot. I have figured out, it took me a couple of days to figure out what had actually happened here. They had a high quality, sound track that they played over the PA system for the concert that you could hear the actual sound of machine guns and other military weapons and even bullet strikes on the ground. That was coordinated with special visual effects. So in the middle of the hotel, you had on the 4th floor light bursts simulating a machine gun above it, 3 light bursts, repeatedly, simulate modern American weapons. You had a guy in the crowd who turns to shoot on the crowd. You can see the light, but there are no bullets because he's firing blanks. So those are at least 3 shooting locations, all of which are simulated, even ignoring, the wing of the floor 32 where Paddock was supposed to be. We have so much more evidence. Mona Alexis Presley has been going through the obits, as I mentioned. She's finding case after case. There are people who died in different states or on different dates or for other causes of death. We have a follow-up high-definition video of the police cleaning up the scene, and there are no signs of any actual bullet strikes on the ground. The FBI was outed for having erased the cell phones and the laptops of witnesses at the scene at the time. Which is obviously inconsistent with it having been real. In fact, there's been no forensic study of where the bodies were, where they'd been shot, no reconstruction of the trajectories. It's all a farce. It's a complete farce.
The kitty in the background.
Yeah, my cat.
He's hungry.
He gets on the air surprisingly often.
I love it. But yes, you mentioned the mysterious deaths that surround the whole Vegas shooting. It is pretty wild, right? A little mysterious indeed, the fact that these people would just die in the way that they did.
Well, you're talking about the witnesses who were contradicting the official account, I take it.
Right.
Like the one woman who said there were at least 2 shooters. Well, I've already given you a recount that there had to be at least 3, and if Paddock, that would be a 4th. But it's all there in the record. I mean, you can find that right off of the videos that were taken at the time. I mean, there's nothing mysterious. I can't see why you'd want to kill someone over that, unless the contradictions of the claim there was 1 shooter were serious threats to the plausibility of the account, which is that, I mean, it's stupefying. Get this. Jesus Campos, who's supposed to be the security guard, isn't even registered as a security guard. He mysteriously disappears. The next thing we know, he's on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Only
Yes.
He's gained 30 to 50 pounds. He doesn't have his prescription eyeglasses. Ellen seems very uncomfortable with the interview. They never pan onto the crowd. And guess what? Ellen DeGeneres show is owned by MGM, whose chief executive officer had sold off 80% of his stock prior to the event to buy it back up cheap and make a bundle. And look, when I tell you it's a movie, that's what MGM does. They make movies. They made a movie right there in Las Vegas.
Yes, and then they had the website, what was it called, where you can rent a crowd, right? What was it called?
Oh yeah, it's called, Crowds on Demand.
Crowds on Demand, yes.
They started recruiting 15 days in advance. So you had these, the crowd was seated and, on cue. They started to react, saying, oh my God, we're being shot, we're hit, blood, and everyone just reacts. The naive people who actually came to attend the concert, of course, take for granted that it's all real. But get this, Intel Hub thought it had to establish a mini coup. I mean, look. Mona has discovered the radio scanner for the event, and there were things going on not just at the Mandalay, but at the Bellagio, at the Flamingo, at New York. And they're just going through. I mean, this was a drill. It was a mass casualty drill. Nobody was killed. In fact, I have a Facebook friend who called the 3 closest hospitals to the arena, where if you had 500 wounded, I mean, the medical facilities in Las Vegas would have been simply overwhelmed.
Are you
3 closest hospitals?
Jim, are you referring to Dean Ryan?
No. I'm talking about a Facebook friend.
Oh, a Facebook friend. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about Dean Ryan. I'm talking about a Facebook friend who called the 3 closest hospitals. She gave the hospital's number, so I followed up. One of the hospitals even told her, you must be calling about the crisis drill, but no one was shot, and, check with the local police. So I called the same 3 hospitals she'd cited, and 2 of them confirmed exactly what she'd said. The other said no comment, which I said, well, I interpret that as being a no. Someone had told him not to give out any information. The whole thing was a farce. So get this. Intel Hub thought it had a coup because there'd been a mini massacre at Hooters. They knew there'd been a mini massacre because they found 17 ambulances were pulled up at Hooters. Well, they weren't paying attention to their own footage of what was going on inside Hooters because you had a whole bunch of very bored crisis actors sitting around with sheets waiting their turn to be taken out on stretchers as though they were victims.
I think I saw one of these photos, and they captioned it that there was no blood flowing from this victim's leg.
Well, I don't know. There was one that was put right on the front cover of the New York Times that I called out immediately because she's lying on her side, but the blood is flowing, across her leg, not down her leg. If she'd been shot and, bleeding, the blood would have been flowing down her leg. It was like somebody dripped blood on her after she was on the ground.
I see.
I noticed that immediately. That was on the front page of the New York Times.
It's such a weird,
which I've come to which is so dishonest, and so corrupt. I've come to refer to as the Langley newsletter.
Ah, yes. That's funny. And Jim, I must say, we don't even have one photograph or any video of him in action.
No, and that's insane because there are video cameras everywhere.
Exactly.
This gets back to the change in the timeline too, Michael. This is a very good point. We have a follow-up by a guy who went into the Mandalay Bay and found you couldn't go anywhere where you weren't under surveillance. So the initial story for Jesus Campos was that he heard the shooting, knocked on the door, disrupted Stephen Paddock, who then committed suicide, right? Well, that at least sounds sort of like maybe it might have happened.
Maybe.
But they changed it. They changed the story. So now Campos knocks on his door before he begins the shooting, and he fires 200 rounds down the hallway at Jesus Campos. I mean, and nobody notices in this luxury hotel that's just, infested with cameras everywhere, and it's absurd.
It is.
So when this fake Jesus Campos, who weighs 30 to 50 pounds more, goes on Ellen DeGeneres, he's talking about knocking on the door just before the guy commits suicide. In other words, he wasn't even current with the revised timeline.
It's funny you mentioned Ellen DeGeneres, who obviously dances and parades herself with her audience. You just reminded me of Megyn Kelly, who I have been criticizing as well on this program, laughing at her attempts of trying to connect with any audience now. And it's terrible. I'm not sure if you have witnessed her dancing around, but it's atrocious.
Megyn dancing around?
Megyn Kelly actually dancing around.
But she blew up.
Jesus
she
Christ.
did this interview with Alex Jones about Sandy Hook. And Alex really isn't an expert on Sandy Hook. I'm not exactly sure what to claim Alex is an expert on. I did have a relationship with him at one time because when he organized what he called the American Scholars Conference in Los Angeles in 2006, I had founded Scholars for 9/11 Truth in December of 2005. He invited me to be the keynote speaker to give an overview about 9/11. And then on Sunday, there was a panel discussion of four, which he moderated. All four were members of Scholars. Steve Jones, my co-chair, Bob Bauman, who was an Air Force ace in Korean War with 101 kills. That's staggering. But he'd been the scientific director of the Star Wars program under Presidents Reagan and Ford. Webster Tarpley had published a book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in the USA, and me as the head of Scholars. And it was an hour and 45, and C-SPAN put it on, 7 or 8 very good time slots. So I think it actually had the effect of shattering any discussion about 9/11. My presentation was about the top 10 reasons why the Arab hijackers were fake. And you can find that online without any effort. But there's another reason why somebody accusing me of being a stooge for the government. I mean, they just have their head where the sun does not shine.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous that they would make these accusations, and of course, they blame me for the same thing, and it's just so dumb. I can't even take these people seriously, but of course, like I mentioned earlier, it just comes with the territory. There's always going to be people like this, who are, little out there. And people who are very out there and probably very paranoid.
Well, people can be paranoid. I mean, if these are amateurs who just don't understand, sure, they can be caught unexpectedly by hearing nobody died at Sandy Hook. But when they look at the proof, I mean, if they're rational, if they're open to responding to evidence, then they're going to adjust their beliefs. But, these cases are so outrageous. I mean, Charlottesville, as I was saying, we had 2 cars, 2 drivers, 3 different takes. I mean, it's embarrassing. Then you have these major blunders by the U.S. attorney who's doing the review. I've done 2 blogs about this guy's review to, about 100 people at the University of Virginia, from the president on down, including 75 members of the Department of History, berating them for not taking seriously what I pointed out months ago. I mean, now I've got a book about it, but I pointed out months ago there'd been 2 drivers and 2 cars and 2 or even 3 takes, and they just ignored it at the time. Who's standing up for truth and justice? I mean, this was a university founded by Thomas Jefferson, and they're all abdicating their responsibility. In my opinion, they all ought to be fired, dismissed from their position for abdicating their responsibility.
Yeah, anytime I see someone suppressing anyone's freedom of speech or limiting them in any kind of way, I just think that's unconstitutional. I think those kind of people need to go away, in my personal opinion. I just can't stand anyone like that. And furthermore, I have not gotten your opinion on all of these sexual allegations that have been going on. I also have referenced this year, 2017, as the year of sexual allegations, James. It seems like we go and take a little nap, and next thing we know, someone else is being accused of something naughty.
Well, it's catching up with the world, right? I mean, this guy, Harvey Weinstein, was apparently a monster. I have heard reports. I mean, I think Gwyneth Paltrow is just a lovely person.
She is.
She was virtually his concubine, that he was treating her so abusively. And, you know, all these other cases, Al Franken, when he was so savage in interrogating Jeff Sessions, I thought it was completely despicable. So I take a certain satisfaction that you know, karma has given it this twist. And the end is not in sight. These are just the first few waves of these revelations, Michael.
Oh yeah, this is a warm-up.
Yeah. They're going to continue.
This is just a warm-up here. I truly believe so. I think things are just barely underway. And of course, I've noticed some comedians being hit with it too. Louis C.K., another guy who was just taken out. And, you know, I like the comedian. I like Louis C.K. He's a pretty funny guy. But of course, not everyone has a sense of humor. And what he did was also pretty wrong, in my opinion. And what I always thought kind of interesting was, who are these people? Not who are these people, but these people that have basically sunk their careers, per se. Will we see them ever reemerge to a certain degree? That's what I am curious about, Jim.
Well, there's a very damn interesting case here in Alabama with this Judge Roy Moore, who's been so controversial. I mean, this is the guy who posted the 10 Commandments in his courtroom. And you had this allegation from this woman who claimed when she was, 14,
something
that
like
he was
that.
Coming on to her, and she had this signature in her yearbook as proof. And she's been forced to admit that it was fabricated. It was fake.
I saw that, yes.
Well, once any aspect of a case like this is shown to be false, you're entitled to dismiss the whole case. It's actually a principle under the law. Fraud vitiates everything. And this is like Sandy Hook. We have dozens of proofs that the whole Sandy Hook thing was fraudulent. Dozens of them. That anyone should hang on to continue to persist in maintaining that Sandy Hook was a real event. 20 kids and 6 adults actually died. When the school was closed by 2008, there were no kids there. Nobody died. Paul Preston, who's from the Los Angeles area, superintendent of schools himself, who's conducted some of these drills, was so disturbed by what he saw being reported from Newtown that he reached out to his contacts in the Obama Department of Education. Mind you, I repeat that, in the Obama Department of Education, all of whom confirmed to him that it had been a drill, that no children had died, and that it was done to promote gun control. I mean, it's that bad. It's that blatant. Even Obama's own people were acknowledging that it was a drill.
Yes, and by the way, for those curious, if you just Google Sandy Hook Nobody Died a PDF, you'll find Mr. Fetzer's book for free.
Yes, that's right. Because once Amazon banned it, I mean, I could, have tried to argue with them. It didn't violate their guidelines. Of course, it didn't violate their guidelines. The book was produced by CreateSpace, which is a subsidiary of Amazon. It had already been up there for nearly a month. But they were banning it because I don't know if I told you this story. I was called about 2 days before the ban by Inside Edition saying they wanted to do did I tell you that story?
No, I didn't know about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Inside Edition said they wanted to feature me in our findings about Sandy Hook, but they had to do a pre-interview interview. And I found myself in what I'm now convinced was a basement at Langley where I was being grilled. I mean, there were no pleasantries, Hey, good to talk with you. He's saying, what do you got? And I'd lay out, well, we got 13 contributors and we've been able to show the school was closed by 2008. There were no students there. What do you got? Well, we got 50 photographs of the Adam Lanza. They're featuring, furnishing an empty house to serve as the Adam Lanza. We got a photograph of the bedroom and there's some red stuff on the bed, but it's not blood. And there's papers on the, a cedar chest and, they seem to be keeping track of how they were organizing. And there's a blue moving pad under the leg of the bed that in their haste they forgot. What do you got? We got 50 more photographs of the refurbishing the school to serve as the stage, including inside and out. And that was in deplorable condition, but especially that there's a SWAT team there and just above the vehicle, you can see the string of 4 windows from classroom 10 and that they're not shot out, which means it's before the event. And there's Wayne Carver reclining against the wall there with his arms folded, awaiting the arrival of his portable mortuary tent. There's crime scene tape up for a crime that is yet to be committed. What else you got? Well, we got photos of the windows in classroom 10 before and after. We have photos of the perps drilling holes in the window frame to simulate bullet holes, and another where the pink rods are extending, and they're all exactly 90 degrees to the window pane and parallel to one another, which means this is a fantasy that I am a former series commander. I had 15 DIs and 300 recruits under my command going through recruit training in the Marine Corps, including marksmanship, and no one would take this seriously. At some point, he just decided he'd had enough, and he gave the word that this book had to be banned.
Yeah, that's terrible that they would actually do that.
Yeah, well, they wanted to find out what I got. And they weren't even going to bother wasting time by looking at the book. They wanted to do it what they thought was the quickest, most efficient by subjecting me to the third degree.
Yeah, but you know how that goes, Jim. They had an agenda.
Well, of course they had an agenda.
Clearly.
Of course they had an absolutely 100% they had an agenda.
By the way, the chat room would love for your wife to get on here with you one day.
She thinks I'm a nut.
I would love to hear both of you go back and forth.
Well, listen. There are, I sometimes run across absolutely sensational comments, and here's one that I'm going to feature in a blog I am in the process of drafting. The guy identifies himself. I mean, that's one way you know for sure that this is an authentic person. His name's Richard Plant, Plante, March 3rd, 2017. The distance by vehicle between Monroe and Newtown is roughly several miles, 10 maximum. In 2010, I was visiting a friend of mine who lived in Monroe at the time. I didn't know this when I was visiting him, but he had an evening appointment one night to go to Sandy Hook Elementary School to pick up a couple of student desks on the cheap for his kids to use at home. When we arrived at Sandy Hook School, the parking lot appeared to not have been in use for years. Inside, the building showed signs of previous flooding, and water stains were up to about several inches above the floor. There was mold everywhere due to this flooding. The caretaker of the building quickly showed us where to locate the desks, and we got them out and into my friend's vehicle. Further observations of mine indicate that this was a very, very neglected building, and the caretaker even indicated the building was condemned because it was full of asbestos everywhere. This building was a mess. And the fake news want us to believe there were 400 and something elementary school in classes on a fateful day in, he says, November. Of course, it was December 2012. That a guy named Adam Lanza shot and killed some of the children and adult teachers. Give me a break. I spent a lot of years in construction and renovation. There's just no way any authorities would allow young children into a building such as the one I saw in June of 2010. No wonder the grief the townspeople showed didn't appear genuine, even on TV. As a contractor, you deal with a lot of people, but the emotion of the witnesses and parents just wasn't genuine.
Yeah, that was weird.
Those are my thoughts on the Sandy Hook story.
Weird.
And they thought they would get away with it. Thank God few of us are that stupid. Richard.
Yeah, those interviews with the parents and other people there were kind of strange. The lack of emotion, I should say. They were giggling and laughing.
Yeah, exactly.
What the hell was that?
Las Vegas. You got
Yeah.
crisis actors hiding behind cars and giggling because they know the whole thing's fake. So they think it's a lark. You had Robbie Parker come out and of the building, and he's all jocular, laughing, smiling. Then he turns and sees the crowd of assembled reporters. He pauses, hyperventilates to get into character, and then goes on to speak solemnly about the loss of his daughter, Emily, having the presence of mind to mention her donation website, which was part of the scam. I mean, as I've already reported, these fake families pocketed over $1 million in contributions from sympathetic but gullible Americans. I mean, it's just staggering, which is why James Tracy, being booted out of his university when he's trying to protect the public interest by informing them that this doesn't appear to be on the up and up. Maybe they could have saved some of that $130 million and put it to better benefit if they hadn't contributed to the fake parents of Sandy Hook. And
when will it stop, Jim, in your opinion? When will all of this sort of just end?
Well, the fact that, the legal cases are setting a precedent, just as this acceptance of the amicus curiae brief by the appeals court is going to put an end to the Boston bombing mythology. The fact that Wolfgang, that Lenny Pozner abandoned his lawsuit against Wolfgang is very telling. I believe that Tracy is going to prevail in his lawsuit against Florida Atlantic. I've been sending these newspapers in South Florida accurate information about what's been going on and where they can find more. And it's just so revealing of the degree of corruption. I mean, you mentioned before that we don't really have investigative journalism anymore. What we have
really
are propaganda outlets. We're
Yes.
very much in the era of the Soviet-controlled press, Michael. And it's just astounding to me that America is sunk into this quagmire of false information and propaganda.
Oh, by the way, one of the listeners had sent me a private email here wanting me to ask you your opinion on cryptocurrency. I'm not sure if you ever bothered to.
Yeah. Well, somebody actually bought me a tiny piece of Bitcoin.
Really?
And yeah,
Nice.
I mean, I thought it was a wonderful gesture. I haven't really quite figured out what's going on here, but it's just growing in value tremendously. I mean, like 1,200% this year alone, something on that order. So, I'm thinking, gee, maybe I actually ought to invest a couple $100. I mean, if it's growing like that, it could be, a significant development. So that's just my opinion. I'm not a financial expert. I can just tell you, it looks to me like if you had a couple $100, you didn't have anything special to do with it. Investing in Bitcoin might be a good move.
Yeah, I've seen some positives and some negatives about Bitcoin. I don't have any stock in that myself, but I know a couple people that do, and they seem to like it.
Well, there's so many references to the collapse of, the dollar, and that there's going to be a new dollar.
Everyone says that. They always say the economy is going to collapse. They've been saying that lately.
Michael, I agree. But, this would just be a form of protection, diversing yourself in a relatively modest way. I mean, I'm not suggesting investing your life savings.
Oh, of course not. There's been alleged...
I think I may have to scrounge up a couple $100 of my own and buy some Bitcoin. I mean, it's just...
No, I'm not against it. Yeah.
I can't believe this, but we have a daughter now residing in Bloomington, Indiana, who'd been a librarian, and she, I remember this so clearly, called me to say that there was a new company out there that was going to be selling books online, and I might want to consider investing. And of course, it was Amazon.com.
Ah, I see.
And of course, I didn't invest. You may recall this wonderful scene in You've Got Mail, where this woman who's working with Meg Ryan, in a little bookstore, reveals, when they're asking about her financial security, how she bought AT&T when it was really low.
Yes, I saw that movie. I saw that movie in theaters, by the way.
Oh, I love that movie.
Way back.
My wife and I flew to the UK on one of our trips. I've been there like 7 times. And on this particular, I think that this trip, actually, we were heading to Athens, and I'd been invited to speak in Athens. The leading muckraker in Athens had a TV show. He wanted me to come and present on 9/11. This would be in December of 2006.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, he flew me and my wife, all expense paid, to Athens for a week. And when we were coming back, there was not only chaos at the Athens airport getting our flight, but when we got to Heathrow, there were further problems. But they put us into first class to come back. I mean, this was something they just did as a benefit to us. And I watched You've Got Mail, I think, 7 times on the flight back. I spent the whole time watching it over and over.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good film to watch.
That TV show, by the way, was originally scheduled for 3. They extended to 3.5 hours. They told me while they had a dozen participants that usually only a few of them would ask questions. I said, not tonight. And I was exactly right. Every one of the 12 asked questions. It wound up going 3.5 hours, was broadcast worldwide by satellite. Frankly, I think it was the high point of the 9/11 truth movement. We had a 9/11 member who was working at a pizzeria in Boston, just riding into rave about how his father, who was born in Greece, was watching Greek television and couldn't believe that here I was, talking about 9/11. And, it was really great because they put together wonderful clips. They'd really done their homework in prepping for this particular show.
When you were a professor, by the way, Jim, did the administration ever get upset at you for your viewpoints?
Well, it's very interesting. I retired in 2006. Now, that was only, 6 months after I founded Scholars in 2005.
Correct.
And I retired in June, which is the same month that I served as a keynote speaker at the American Scholars Conference organized by Alex Jones. So in relation to 9/11, they, in a way, never even had a chance to figure out what I was about.
Oh.
But they knew my work on JFK and were actually very supportive. There was an associate dean in the graduate school on the Twin Cities campus who loved my work on JFK. The university wound up being very supportive. They gave me the money to hold a conference on the death of JFK in Minneapolis in 1999. They gave me money to hold a second conference on the Duluth campus in 2003.
Is there, Jim, is there any video footage of this?
Yeah. I'm sure you can find it. Yeah. It was called the Death of JFK in Minneapolis, 1999. The Great Zapruder Film Hoax Conference wound up having like 66 segments. I think there was some limit on how much you could put up at one time. But if you do a search for it, you'll find, I had the 6 leading experts on the Zapruder film in the world. It's a veritable bonanza.
Yeah, you've done a damn good job with the research, Jim.
Well, again, you see, Michael, I bring in the best people on each of these subjects. I don't just pretend that I can cover it all, that I'm an expert in areas where I'm not, but I am an expert in logic, critical thinking, scientific reasoning. And so I'm really good at sorting out the evidence and determining what's the most important, what's the most weighty, which evidence makes a difference. And we've become very adept at sorting out the manufactured, the false evidence from the real. For example, Jim Mars, now departed this earth, and I did an article entitled Framing the Patsy, the Case of Lee Harvey Oswald, which we published on my blog, Going Through the Backyard Photographs. And would you believe, let me see if I can pull it up now, it's been reinforced by new research by Larry Rivera, who found images of both Lee Oswald and of Billy Lovelady, who was his co-worker, who was supposed to be the man in the doorway, and wound up establishing that, in fact, not only is the man in the doorway the height, the weight, the build to be Lee Oswald, but he also has the same facial features as Lee Oswald. And the man standing beside him with his hands raised has the same features as Billy Lovelady. So I can tell you right now where to find the blog. It's entitled, and you can just put in the title, JFK : Bethesda autopsy photos not JFK / Oswald framed, Warren report a sham, but it's easy just to put in Bethesda autopsy photos not JFK, and you'll get everything I'm talking about right now, because we discovered that the autopsy photographs that Robert Groden had promoted as being authentic autopsy photographs aren't even of JFK.
Yes.
We'd had questions about him in the beginning because his eyes are open, but Charles Crenshaw, who was the physician who was in trauma room number 1 with JFK and then 2 days later was responsible for the care and treatment of his alleged assassin Lee Oswald, told me he had closed JFK eyes. He was the last physician to see him as he was being wrapped in sheets and put in the bronze ceremonial casket. And yet there's this photograph, and I show it toward the bottom. Once we know that it's not JFK, the question becomes, who is it? Robert Morningstar, who's a longtime student of Officer J.D. Tippit, had long proposed that it was Tippit instead of JFK. But I show you a photograph from the autopsy of Tippit that makes it very clear it's not Tippit. Dennis David, who was a non-commissioned NCO, who was keeping track, logging everyone who went in and out of the morgue, had been directed not to log in the casket of someone he was told was a major. And I suspect this body is of the major. I mean, look, when you got the whole American military personnel, you're going to find somebody who looks a great deal like almost anyone you want. And they found somebody who looked a lot like JFK, but until now, no one had ever actually concluded that this was not JFK. I mean, there might have been some suspicions, but we actually prove it here. Then in relation to the backyard photographs, Larry Rivera found a suitable photograph of the man that Jim Mars and I had identified as the stand-in for Lee Oswald, who was a Dallas police officer by the name of Roscoe White, who not only was the right height, weight, build, he's actually a little more husky than Lee Oswald, but he's got the block chin, which is not Lee Oswald's chin, and he's got this funny lump on his right wrist from a bone that apparently did not properly heal. And Larry found just a perfect image to superimpose. So you go there and you'll even see a GIF where we prove that Roscoe White was the body double for Lee Oswald, who had himself told Will Fritz, the homicide detective who was interrogating him, that when shown one of these photographs, that it was his face pasted on someone else's body, that with time he'd be able to prove it. Well, we have proven it. And then that he was in the doorway. I mean, this is really so telling. This was the deepest, darkest secret of the Warren Commission.
Yeah, that was the day America found out that once shadow government wants you gone, they'll stop at no end.
Oh, it's a disgrace.
It really is. It truly is.
Several early students had concluded that it was Lee Oswald in the doorway. Harold Weisberg published the second in his whitewash series in 1966 entitled Photographic Whitewash. In the last 4 or 5 pages, he's talking about how the Warren Commission staff was going out of its way to suppress information that Lee Oswald had been in the doorway when the motorcade walked past. Even Jim Garrison, of course, the celebrated district attorney who brought the lawsuit against Clay Shaw, which he would no doubt have won, but for the mysterious deaths of 3 of his key witnesses. I mean, they were taken out, so they couldn't testify. Believed that Lee was in the doorway. Well, Larry found suitable photographs to use to create GIFs and has confirmed that, in fact, not only are the height, the weight, the build, and so forth Lee Oswald, but the facial features are also those of Lee, not those of Billy, and that the man standing behind Lee with his hands upraised to protect his eyes from the sun actually is Billy Lovelady. So between the book, JFK, Who, How, and Why, and this blog, you're up to date on JFK. I'm telling you, that is the latest information we have in the world on the death of our 35th president.
Right. Did you include the mysterious call that was made before the death of JFK?
Oh, you're talking about where it appears that Jack Ruby actually made a call to the police department suggesting they shouldn't move him. There's several fascinating aspects about this. I don't have a copy of the book right here. Well, I could grab one. But let me tell you this, because this is extraordinarily interesting.
Go ahead.
Ralph Sinkay, who is a chiropractor, he has an abrasive manner, and he's been widely, criticized for his mode of presentation, but he's quite a brilliant guy. First, focus my attention on the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, and the T-shirt to identify the man in the doorway rather than the facial features. Ralph is very used to helping people, exercise so their clothes fit better. And it was from that point on that we really nailed down the man in the doorway, because I would publish as many as 10 blogs about it with different aspects, different proofs. So Larry is now confirming it. But get this, regarding Jack Ruby having shot Lee Oswald, which we all thought we saw on television, Ralph, I'm just telling you, this is a guy who thinks outside the box. Notice some oddities, that the back of the hair, that Jack Ruby had a scruffy back of the hairline, but the man who shot Lee Oswald had a very neatly trimmed back of the head. That the sideburns didn't look right. In fact, the height isn't even quite right. It turns out, and he's presented this case, and I'm persuaded that he is correct, that the person who actually shot Lee Oswald was not Jack Ruby, but an FBI agent by the name of James Bookout. And this is really fascinating because Jerry Corsi, who's a longtime student of JFK, was enlisted by InfoWars to do a series on JFK.
Oh.
And he was going to feature Ralph Sinkay, and then he was going to feature me, and then he was going to feature Larry Rivera. Well, frankly, I never believed it was going to happen. But he did have Ralph Sinkay on. And it may be it was intended to be a setup that Ralph, because as I say, he has this abrasive personality, would turn people off. But Ralph was actually on his best behavior. He talked about all the evidence, height, weight, build, shirt, T-shirt, that we knew that this was Lee Oswald in the doorway without even going into the facial features, which was going to fall to Larry Rivera. But also the evidence he'd unmasked that the guy who actually shot Lee Oswald was not Jack Ruby, but Bookout. And I'm telling you, that got on the air, and I think many people may have thought it sounded so implausible that they were dumbfounded when by the end of the show they realized he'd actually made a convincing case.
Did Alex let him talk?
Oh, it wasn't Alex who was doing the interviewing.
Oh.
It was Jerry Corsi, actually.
If it was Alex, he wouldn't let him get a word in.
And he did let him talk.
That's good.
See, Corsi, because he's an expert in the area, was given, this assignment to put this together. But he hasn't had me on, nor do I expect that to happen. He hasn't had Larry on, nor do I expect that to happen.
Probably
but our
not.
proofs are just so powerful. I mean, look at this particular blog. JFK, Bethesda autopsy photos, not JFK, Oswald frame, Warren report is sham. I mean, if you got the wrong target, if you're blaming this on a lone demented gunman, but he actually was in the doorway at the time the motorcade passed by, and your most important proof is the backyard photograph that actually was staged with a body double, and we've been able to identify the person who stood in for him and that his face was pasted on the backyard photograph, just as he told Will Fritz. I mean, and when it turns out that the body in the autopsy photographs isn't even the body of JFK, I'm telling you, there's just nothing left of the Warren Commission report.
Yes, and we are running out of time here, but
yes,
I do want to just randomly throw out some more questions here. And one of them I received multiple times. People want to know your opinion on marijuana, of all things.
I think marijuana is great. It's super high. It's much better than alcohol. It has less damaging effects than tobacco. You don't get lung cancer from marijuana. You don't get cirrhosis of the liver. Doonesbury, Gary Trudeau, did a cartoon years and years and years ago where Mr. Butts, representing the tobacco industry, is meeting Mr. J, representing a joint marijuana. And Mr. Butts is boasting how he was responsible for 250,000 deaths last year. And Mr. J has to sheepishly admit he's not responsible for even one. In my opinion, to penalize a generation because it wants to smoke its high rather than drink it is simply insane.
Right.
It appears to me to be a lobby for the liquor industry that's worried they're going to lose sales to the marijuana industry. Go to Colorado where they're making a bonanza to offset, the government's, supplementing the government's revenue massively. Other states, it's absolutely should be the case. Many of us were profoundly disillusioned when Barack Obama, right after his election, was asked about legalizing marijuana and said he'd oppose it. Jeff Sessions is a fossil in relation to marijuana. He seems to have been convinced by that ridiculous reefer
propaganda, right?
Yeah, pure talk about amateurish propaganda. I believe in marijuana. I think marijuana is great. The only problem is the illegality in many states forces decent, hardworking Americans to become criminals if they want to enjoy as a recreational activity smoking marijuana. Yeah, they're often, caught, prosecuted. We're allocating an irrational amount of resources to victimless crimes. They're put in prison. They're taken out of the workforce. So you not only lose the taxes they'd be contributing, but it's costing, I think, on the average about $100,000 a year per taxpayer for a prisoner incarcerated for what should not be a crime. There's an absolutely brilliant book about it by a guy named, I think it's Peter McWilliams. It's nobody's business if you do. Let me just say, of all the books I've read in my whole life, this is one of the most impactful. This is very, very deep and searching. It's nobody's business if you do. I recommend it highly.
Nice.
I support the legalization of marijuana 100%.
And I do too. I acquiesce. And it's outrageous that in some places that, you would do more time molesting. You would do more time if you're caught, say, trafficking marijuana than you would if you would have molested a child.
Right, or robbed a bank for crying out loud.
It's atrocious.
It's ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous. So I'm glad
sometimes,
they asked the question.
Jim, it's something.
I rarely have a chance to address it, and I'm very pleased.
Yes, I'm glad I asked you that. And sometimes I wonder, those who created these laws, it makes you seem that they create these laws to protect themselves in a certain way. Well,
they're to protect the alcohol industry and the tobacco industry. These are big business, giants, and they have a forceful lobby. I mean, but it's insane,
Yes.
Marijuana is better for you. It's a superior high. It has no known after effects or consequences. And, people who argue there are, and you get these new medical studies that claim here's some heretofore unsuspected hazard of marijuana. It's bullshit. I'll just tell you flat out, it's bullshit. Don't believe it.
Yes, and to wrap it up, we are well underway NFL season, and I'm pretty positive you are a fan of football, aren't you, Jim?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm college football in particular. I'm convinced by the way that the pros are rigged. The most disillusioning experience is the Seahawks losing to the Patriots when they, had this reception at the end of the game on the 1 yard line. They could have run it in 3 different chances, and on the first play, Russell Wilson passes and it's intercepted. That was throwing the game away. I'm convinced it was deliberate. Pete Carroll was in on it. I think pro football is scripted. I have a guy who's been for years sending me comments on who's going to win just based on the betting line, and I've never known him to be wrong even once.
Yeah, I like college a bit better. It seems
the college game appears to me to still be basically honest.
They're very hungry.
We did have a nut job here by the name of Gary Anderson who I'm convinced he threw a Big Ten championship game between Wisconsin and Ohio State where we lost by 56-0. It was ludicrous. We were going to win a game against LSU too, by the way, for our pack. Our great back, Gordon, what is his first name? We have this absolutely brilliant. He's playing for the San Diego Chargers right now.
Yes.
Was just running all over LSU the first half, and Gary Anderson refused to play in the second half, and we wound up losing that game, which would have been very big time because LSU was so highly regarded at the time, and we were just taking him to the cleaners. So this guy, Gary Anderson, I regard as completely corrupt, and I'm very glad we got rid of him. He may have given away the game to Ohio State so that they could have this runaway victory and be put into the playoffs, which is what happened as a consequence. We had, of course, a game with Ohio State now for the Big Ten championship after going 12-0 and wound up losing. That was a heartbreaker, but I can accept that. I think it was perfectly right that Ohio State was not put into the Final Four and that Alabama was. I think that was reasonable. You can't put in a team that has 2 losses into the national championship lest you discredit yourself anyway.
Right. I've always preferred college ball to the NFL because the students there are a lot more hungrier, in my opinion. They have more drive.
Yeah, no, of course I paid attention to Russell Wilson because he came here. He was a 1-year transfer and he just did brilliant. We won the Rose Bowl with Russell Wilson. So we followed him, to the Seahawks. My son happens to live in Seattle, so I have a special affection for Seattle and the Seahawks.
Yes. I forgot you have a son.
I'm going to be out there actually in February. I'm going to be giving a talk and, let's see, the weekend is, I think it's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and I'll be giving a talk in Portland on the 2nd or 3rd of February.
Oh, what are these venues? You should plug them now if you can.
Well, Tim, for those who live in Portland, Tim Truitt is the guy to contact. He runs their 9/11 at Ben Collett in Seattle, which would be on Sunday, and I think Sunday is the 4th, Saturday is the 3rd. I'm coming out there to participate in a conference about the Middle East. and the role of
yes.
Saudi Arabia in relation to ISIS, 9/11, and all that. So I may wind up giving the talk for the 9/11 group on Friday night, but it will be either Friday or Saturday. I'm also going to be giving a talk about JFK on Saturday in the morning, late morning.
Very nice.
David Robinson would be the contact there. So I will, be more specific about this as the plans develop right now,
okay.
given my travel preferences, but I don't actually have my tickets in hand yet.
No problem. And also, on a final word, I did get that interview with Mr. Scott Bennett, which turned out to be fantastic. I would love to have both of you on sometime.
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge fan of Scott. He's a former U.S. Army Intel and PSYOPs officer. He was framed for a phony case and incarcerated in a low, security penitentiary with Brad Birkenfeld, where he learned all about the financing for 9/11.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I know, is that sensational?
Wow.
He published in a brilliant book, a shell game, and is sent to so many members of Congress years ago, and they haven't responded, which is another proof positive.
That's not surprising.
Corrupt to the core.
Yes, this whole political system, this conundrum, it's as corrupt as can be, Jim.
It's unbelievable.
It really is.
Of Israel. I mean, this Jerusalem thing is just the latest manifestation of what Cynthia McKinney told us years ago, namely when new members of Congress arrive in Washington, they're asked to sign a pledge to put the interests of Israel ahead of those of the United States, and those who refuse find themselves confronted with a well-financed alternative candidate, or even that their district has been redrawn and they no longer have a seat. Cynthia was able to overcome those obstacles, but most not. And a friend of mine recently asked me, did I know how many members of our present Congress have refused to sign the pledge? And I said, no. And he held up one finger of one hand. One.
Outrageous. That AIPAC.
Outrageous. That's why I said to this Jerusalem thing, when I was denouncing Trump and Sheldon Adelson and consigning them to hell for eternity, we might as well, for truth in advertising, redesignate ourselves the United States of Israel.
Might as well. The way everything seems everything seems to be interconnected with Saudis and this or that. It's outrageous, really, Jim.
Well, Michael, it's such a pleasure for me. I really like you as a host, and I think you're just terrific, and I just enjoy these shows tremendously.
Me too, Jim. I hope to one day drink a beer with you, sir.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, Jim. Always an honor and pleasure to have you on the program. And, of course, you could find Jim Fetzer's books at moonrocks.com. And, of course, check out his blogspot. That's jamesfetzer.blogspot.com, correct?
Moonrockbooks.com. Yes, on the blogspot. jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. Yes,
perfect,
thanks,
Jim. Always an honor and pleasure, and I'll touch base with you again in the very near future, sir.
You got it, Mike.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And, of course, that was Mr. James Fetzer there. Always fun to have him on the program. And, of course, the second half of the show is coming up. I'm actually kind of scared. I'm feeling a little triggered here tonight. Things might get a little nasty.
It might make it past, but when all that other garbage comes around, it's going to really do some damage. The biggest problem that we're going to have, though, is not earthquakes. It's not going to be the high tides. It's not going to be any of that. It's going to be the possibility of an electromagnetic pulse, which will shut down the grid. The government's own study said that if the grid is shut down for a year, 90% of the American population would be dead.
Yeah, we're done if that happens. And welcome back to the program. Hi, how's everyone doing? Often imitated but never duplicated, many of you out there know by now. The time has finally come. Oh yes. You've been wanting me to go off on a somewhat angry rant. And you know what? Tonight you just might get that. You gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, as they say. Now if you are easily offended, this is probably the time to shut the show off. Things probably are gonna get a little nasty here. Have you left the room yet? I'll wait a second for you. Is everyone gone? All right. I received numerous emails this week, and I figured instead of answering those privately, which most of them I already did, I thought, hell, I will answer these publicly too. It's been a while since I've done this sort of thing. It's time to reveal a little more truth out there. This is not going to be pretty. You know, maybe I should start a little bit more on a positive note here first. I think I'll do that. Well, not exactly a positive note. It's never that positive. This email came from a username by the name of Bitcoin Double Spender 1. He writes in, or emails in, "A very good day to you, sir. I hope you are doing great, sir." Wow, he hit me with the sir twice there already. "May I please kindly ask, who are the other 2 or 3 folks that is always on your talk show? That is always on your talk show. Why are these 2 or 3 others always spouting profanity on your talk show? Why are there always so much profanity and evil giggling by these 2 or 3 others? Hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much for your time and kind help. Kind regards as always." Well, I already responded to this person privately, but here we go. I'll publicly say this now. I'm doing fantastic, and thank you for caring, if you do, by the way. And I'm not quite sure who he means by these 2, 3 folks that are always on the show. There are a few affiliates to my program here, such as Michael Horn, Marshall Masters, and of course, James Fetzer. And then, why are these 2, 3 others always spouting profanity on your talk show? Well, sir, this is an adult program. Maybe you should lighten the fuck up every now and then. You must be new, my friend. Welcome aboard to this program. It's unfiltered and unbridled. I like to entertain and inform. I've done both of those things repeatedly here, and will continue to do so. If you dislike profanity, perhaps it's time to listen to a safe show on terrestrial radio. Plenty of right-wing wackos on there. You could find plenty of that. This, of course, is a non-PC show. Way out of your element, I'm pretty sure. From my limited understanding of who you are, Mr. Bitcoin Double Spender. I hope that answered your question, and thank you kindly for your email. And of course, this comes from Kahuna Jester 9, and I hope I said your name correctly, my friend. I think that guy was actually in the chat room. For those who are listening right now, if you ever want to interact with me and other listeners, you can go to michaeldeacon.com and click chat room there. And that's usually where you'll find myself and other great listeners like yourself, including this gentleman who wrote into me, Kahuna Jester 9. Again, I do hope I'm saying your username correctly. He says that he's been listening to the show, my show, for a while. He really enjoys the non-judgmental, chill vibe and letting Fetzer go on a rampage on all the usual targets. He finds that hilarious. He also said, what would it be like drinking bourbon at the same time? What would he be like drinking bourbon at the same time? And, you know, I kind of wondered that myself. Sometimes I'll do this program and I'll drink every now and then. It'll be fun. It's fun for everyone out there, really. Everyone enjoys that. Hearing me get a little bit more rambunctious as the program progresses, as I drink, it's always fun. It's great to listen to a little train wreck every now and then. It's a good time. But I'm not sure what he would be like, though, if he started drinking on the program now. Now, that would be fun and interesting. Maybe one of these nights I could convince him to drink with me on the air. We'll see what happens. I won't completely rule that rule it out completely there. I'll keep that idea in mind. So thanks for that. Thank you for that one. And yes, he continued to say just one more thing as to why people are so drawn to him. And yeah, I agree. When Jim is basically going off the top of his head like I am right now, he's fantastic. He goes all over the place, and, you know, I'm guilty of doing the same thing. I go all over the board here. I'm guilty of that. And yeah, so many people are so drawn to Mr. Fetzer because he's fantastic. He's a great guy. And Mr. Kahuna went on to say, listening to you talk about getting effed around a bit lately kind of bothered me because it obviously got to you and you weren't sure who it was. He says that he is Kahuna Jester 9. It's just too much fun to say something absurd or make light of thing. A lot of people think I'm a mark, an asshole. Fuck that. None of my comments are aimed to upset anyone, but if they take it the wrong way, well, fine. Well, people get offended at the smallest thing, and it's skyrocketing, and yes, I agree with you. And he also went on to mention that he hates Judy Wood and Andrew Johnson, and now he's asking if I had heard them talking about the California fires, and I kind of listened to some of the interview, just a few minutes, and normally I don't do that because I rarely have enough time to really go and listen to Judy Wood, since she's, sort of down there on the priorities list, to be honest with you. And, I don't really like to address lower talent, so, it's not always a good combination for me. But yes, I do appreciate the email greatly. Thank you so much, Kahuna Jester 9. I'm glad you are out there and you are listening to the program. Fantastic, really. And I think now it might get a little bit more nastier here. I'm a little worried. Some people might not like this at all. We also got another crazy person out there by the name of Douglas Dietrich. He is a strange one. I had planned to talk a little bit about him, but to be perfectly honest with all of you, I feel kind of bad for him. I really do. There's a lot going on with that poor man. I'm not sure what's going on with him or his mental health, but every time I hear that guy, he is just way out there. He, of course, accused me of all sorts of silly things, of course, but of course, he is wrong, folks. As usual, he can't seem to tell the truth. He really can't. So, I won't say anything else about the poor guy. I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it alone. But, of course, there is sensitive Steve Quell. He's another gentleman who has become kind of upset for whatever reason. First and foremost, I've never said anything negative about sensitive Steve Quell out there. Not once. He seemed to get kind of mad when I mentioned his name to Peter Kling. And even then, Peter didn't say anything bad. So why he left a negative little comment out there on YouTube is beyond me. It's beyond me. I'm not even sure what happened there. Remember when I told all of you people out there, you never know when you've got heat? Well, this is a pretty fine example of that. All I did was simply ask Mr. Peter Kling about Steve Quell. Then a few days later, he left a little comment on YouTube saying, "We're going to strike your channel," and he left this in all caps. So he means business, folks. He left it in all caps. Scary, right? Not exactly sure what's up his ass, to be honest with you, but he should relax a little bit. No one said anything bad about him, but there he is, very angry. And of course I responded to him by saying, "Bring it on, sister." I thought that was a pretty appropriate response. But yes, I'm not quite sure why he has been so upset. Maybe I'll email him and ask him. I'll try to bring him on the program. I'll try to do the same with Douglas Dietrich. I'll bring in these two gentlemen who have been very upset with me lately. Of course, I don't think it's actually going to go down. Douglas won't be on the program, and neither will Mr. Quell, sensitive Quell. Oh, by the way, before I forget, and I'll read that last email to all of you before I wrap it up, I did want to give a big thank you to those in Russia and Germany. They have been really supportive of the program lately, leaving me very, very flattering emails. It's been tremendous, really. Of course, Canada and the Netherlands and Sweden, those are great places that have been pretty supportive of the program too, and I do thank them. Now, a listener by the name of Ed, not sure where he's from, But he did ask me why I haven't done these email segments and why is there someone copying me. Well, let me tell you something, Ed. There's a few people out there who rip me off directly, some of which you'll find on terrestrial radio. But that's another story, and terrestrial radio, it's a lot to say about that. Just know that I have some shit on them too, so they know they can't legally do anything because there's dirt everywhere. I don't think they know it, but I know it. Now, Ed, I used to host another show sort of like this one, but that one was a real disaster. As I say on this opening segment, I'm often imitated but never duplicated, and it's very true. Again, that's a whole nother story. The co-host of the program, his name was Daniel. He was a very real, ignorant, brain-dead, unoriginal individual. I'll speak on that in a moment. Here's the deal. This is someone who should have appreciated my time and my efforts to keep a sinking ship rather, from completely sinking. That's a better way of saying it. Of course, he and many others continue to rip me off in various ways. And of course, he lacks any sense of any originality. It's mind-blowing how unoriginal he is. Definitely has a voice for print, as they say in the business. My advice for him would be to start making videos of himself playing video games on Twitch. That's a much better constructive thing for him to be doing, opposed to continuing to make a complete joke of himself, more so than he already is. Basically, he is someone I can win an argument against without even saying a word. The whole listener email thing wasn't... Oh, can you hear the phone ring? You could hear the little landline there? I'm not sure who's calling me. Oh, that's awful. It was the CIA's calling me, folks. I'm sorry about that. Not sure what that was all about. I ran quickly to try to answer it, but they hung up. Now back to the story here, folks. I'm sorry about that. I had to run out the room there. Yes, the whole email thing, this is gonna be bad. But you know what? It's time to have a little fun. So we're gonna have a little fun here and enlighten you here and pull the curtain back just a little bit here. The whole listener email thing rather, of course, was my creation, but of course that's not an original concept. It's been done so many times before. I just started doing it randomly on the show. Here is a little unknown fact, though, that only one other person knows. What I always found interesting was every email I had received, none of them ever asked for the opinion of the co-host, quote unquote. Not once. I am actually the one who inserted his name, for he wouldn't cry and bitch like he did behind the scenes all the time. Always crying and bitching about something. He was completely sensitive. The only emails I ever got in regards to that twat were complaints telling me to get him off the program. To do a show alone, I have plenty of those emails today. I've gotten just countless emails about how dumb and ignorant he was, how shitty he sounded, that he sounded like Ricky Lake. You get the picture. There's much more. And, it really came to a point that I told him about the various complaints about him. He got upset, bitched and moaned, told me to stop telling him about it. He basically just was very emotional about it. He did not like that. Nothing original ever came out of his poor mouth. Poor guy. And I'll give you another example of that. He wanted to do a listener party thing. I just thought, what a delusional shithead. We don't even have a big enough audience for something like that. And of course, he got that idea from ICP, the Insane Clown Posse. Jesus fucking Christ, are you serious? It's awful. What a terrible idea. He, of course, wanted to call it some sort of gathering as well. It's just bad idea after bad idea. They were always just rip-off bits from shows from the past. Just 100% rip-offs from everywhere else. It's just awful. If you don't believe me, I still have most of these text messages that are just completely laughable and atrocious, really. I still have some of those text messages he sent me after he quit and cried. He told me he wanted to find a job. He wanted to find a girlfriend. He wanted to enjoy his birthday and get away from all of this. And he told me I have his blessing, like I really needed anything from him. Oh boy. So, I didn't really waste my time. I went ahead and created my own show. What I've accomplished on my own here on this run has been completely fantastic. I have really outgrown the old rubbish of what I was being held back by. The proof is in the numbers, and the facts don't care how you feel. And the facts are that my co-host was an abortion. He really acted like a bitter ex-girlfriend. It was the most bizarre thing, really. He, of course, has been spouting plenty of inaccurate information, plenty of half-truths, never really revealing any actual truth on any issue. Typical shitbag behavior, really. It's awful, really, and, he just stinks. I could go on and on and on, but I'm looking at the time, and we are definitely running out of time. As sad as I am, really, I don't want to just close this up, close all of this dialogue up here. I especially like the whole victim portrayal on his part. Anyone who listens to his erroneous and fallacious information that he spews out of his mouth should really be sent off to some sort of island, possibly put down for all of humanity's sake. Is that too much? He stinks. I just repeating what others have said. I think so too. And again, we can go all night doing this, but I do hope that puts things into some perspective for some of you out there who have inquired about the past. Keep in mind, I've never lied or told any half-truths here at all. About anything, really. I've been pretty damn transparent about everything here. I'm just so glad to get rid of the parasite. And I'm glad you have been here to watch and listen to the program grow. And keep in mind, folks, if you want to get in contact with me, you can email me at michaelandofdays@gmail.com. Always fun. I'll answer everyone's emails or concerns. I could probably do that privately if you don't want me to address it publicly here. For those, we won't have to do that. And if you are listening to a replay, keep in mind, we are live every Saturday at 8 p.m. That's 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And yes, this is a call-in show. Please don't forget. And I apologize to those who did call in. I didn't answer any calls tonight. That's kind of mean, right? It's kind of mean. I didn't answer anyone's emails. Or phone calls, rather. A couple emails did come in, though, but I didn't answer those. Sorry about that. Next week, though, we'll return, and I'll answer more questions from all of you out there. And, of course, if you enjoyed tonight's program and want to help keep the program moving and expanding, please feel free to donate any amount you'd want at michaeldeacon.com. Click the little donate button there. I appreciate it. And tonight has been a bit of a rattlesnake, hasn't it, boys and girls? I hope this evening has been entertaining for you, and of course I hope it's been very informative. As usual, I bow my heads to you in respect for listening. Always an honor and pleasure to be here, really. And with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night, everybody.
Sherry. You might in the car this far now. I'm not that way. I'm a Christian.
Oh my.
Drop out of graduate school. Drop out of
You mentioned the Illuminati, yeah. We won't go into who's behind them, but the Illuminati certainly is part of the whole thing. The top members of the Illuminati are open worshippers of Lucifer.
I could tell that all the mainstream media outlets were giving me like bullshit. Like you can just see it. It's clear.
How appropriate. I wish I could be in that ring with Hogan right now.
It's crazy.
I had no idea this shit existed before 726.
It's the simplest shit. You go in there, you see the bartender, and that's what I want.
just for what it's worth, I want to put in my 2 cents to tell you both that you have one of the most incredibly well-rounded shows.
Introducing the greatest tag team on the radio.